The arrival, the sky above, was a deep, endless black, filled with the distant stars that seemed to twinkle in quiet silence. On the planet below, a small, isolated village sat in the middle of an endless desert. In this village lived a young woman, a survivor of a world that had long since forgotten the meaning of peace. Her name was Kayla, and she had always lived a quiet life, away from the chaos that once consumed her planet. But that night was different. The wind howled, and the earth beneath her feet trembled with a deep, unsettling force. Kayla stood at the edge of the village, her eyes scanning the horizon. Something was coming. She could feel it in the air, a shift, an energy that felt far too powerful to ignore. In the distance, a bright light streaked across the dark sky. It was like a comet, but much too controlled. As it grew closer, the light changed shape, becoming a streak of fire as though a massive object was falling from the heavens above. The ground shook as it crashed into the desert far away, sending up a cloud of dust that seemed to swallow the night whole. Kyla's heart raced. She knew what it was. She had heard the stories, tales whispered by the elders, warnings passed down through generations. This was no ordinary falling star. It was something far more dangerous. Kayla turned and ran back to her small hut, her breath quick and shallow. Her instincts screamed at her to hide, but she knew it was too late. The predator was already here, the predator that had been sent to kill her. She bolted the door behind her and tried to calm her racing thoughts. She knew nothing could stop what was coming. Nothing could hide her from the fate that had already been sealed. In her darkest moments, she had wondered if the stories were true, if the predators from the legends were real. Now, she had no doubt. From outside, there was a sound, low, guttural, like the growl of a creature far larger than any animal Kayla had ever seen. It rumbled across the sand, sending waves of fear down her spine. She turned to the window, her hands trembling as she pulled aside the dusty curtain. What she saw made her heart stop. The figure was massive. Its body was covered in thick, dark, armor-like skin glowing with an eerie light. Its eyes, red and menacing, locked onto her. The creature stood tall, at least 10 feet high, and its claws, sharp as knives, flexed and curled with purpose. It was the apex predator, the one who had been sent to end her life. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The world outside her small hut was silent, as though holding its breath. Kayla knew she couldn't escape, couldn't run. She had heard the stories of this predator. It was unstoppable, the most fearsome of its kind. There was no chance for survival. The predator took a step forward, and the ground beneath its feet cracked like thunder. Kayla's pulse raced as she backed away from the window. She could feel the heat from its presence, the dangerous power radiating from its every movement. But something unexpected happened. The predator didn't attack. Instead, it stood there, watching her, as though it was waiting for something. Kayla, though terrified, couldn't help but wonder. Why wasn't it attacking? What was it waiting for? The predator's red eyes never left her. Kayla could only watch in fear, unsure of what would happen next. Would the creature do what it was sent to do? Or was something else happening? Only time would tell. A silent encounter. The desert air grew heavier as the night stretched on, the wind now a soft whisper against the walls of Kayla's small hut. Outside, the apex predator remained, its form dark and looming under the moonlit sky. It hadn't moved in what felt like hours. It didn't make a sound, didn't make a move to break through the thin wooden door. Kayla sat by the window, her eyes locked on the creature, her breath shallow and slow. Every part of her screamed to run, to flee far from this cursed place, but something held her back. The fear was still there, yes, but there was also an unfamiliar pull, a strange sensation that couldn't be explained. What was the predator waiting for? It had come to kill her, she was sure of it. That was its purpose after all. Yet here it was, standing still in the dark, its glowing eyes fixed on her hut, as if it could sense her every movement. A predator like this didn't pause unless there was a reason. Suddenly, the air shifted. A low hum, barely audible, came from outside. Kayla's heart raced as she leaned closer to the window, trying to catch a glimpse of what was happening. The predator's massive form moved slightly, its muscles rippling under the strange armor. Then, without warning, it turned its head slightly, its eyes narrowing as if it had detected something. Kayla's heart skipped a beat. Was it coming for her now? The door to her hut rattled, and Kayla stumbled backward, her pulse quickening. But it wasn't the predator that had moved. It was the door itself. A knock? No, not a knock. The door was being pushed, slowly but surely, by something far more powerful than the wind. The predator's eyes snapped to the door, and for the first time, it made a sound. A low, rumbling growl that sent a chill crawling down Kayla's spine. It didn't move any closer, but its presence was undeniable. Kayla's instinct screamed at her to run, but instead she did something she hadn't planned on. She opened the door. Slowly, cautiously, she stepped outside, the desert air immediately, colder than inside her hut, as if the creature's presence was sucking all the warmth from the world. The predator did not move. It remained still, watching her with eyes that seemed to burn into her very soul. "Why are you waiting?" she asked softly, almost as though she were speaking to herself. Her voice trembled, but she wasn't sure if it was from fear or curiosity. The creature did not answer. It couldn't, of course. But as Kayla stood there facing it for the first time in the open, she saw something that made her hesitate. The predator's posture wasn't aggressive. Its stance, though intimidating, was curious, almost as if it was studying her. Kayla took a slow, careful step forward. The creature's eyes followed her every movement, but still, it did not strike. It was then that Kayla realized something she hadn't before. She wasn't just facing a predator. She was facing something far more complicated, something far more intelligent, something alive. It wasn't there to simply kill her. It was there to understand her. And perhaps, just perhaps, she might have a chance to understand it in return. The unexpected connection. Kayla stood in front of the apex predator, her heart pounding in her chest. The quiet of the night stretched between them, thick with tension, yet something strange lingered in the air. The predator's glowing red eyes never left her, but its stance had softened, no longer poised to strike. It was as if it was waiting for her to make the next move. For a long moment, Kayla simply stared at the creature, trying to make sense of the impossible situation. This was no ordinary beast. It wasn't like the predators she had read about in the old stories. Those creatures were mindless, ruthless killing machines, but this one felt different. There was something almost human in the way it watched her, something that unsettled her more than its terrifying form. A strange impulse tugged at Kayla's mind. Against every instinct telling her to retreat, she took a slow step forward, her boots kicking up a light dust with each movement. The predator's eyes flicked toward her feet, but it made no move to stop her. Then, as if compelled by an unseen force, Kayla raised her hand slightly, as though she could reach out and touch the very air between them. The predator's eyes widened ever so slightly, its head tilting in a manner almost questioning. It was as if it had never been in a situation where it wasn't the one to dictate the terms. Kayla hesitated. Could she trust it? Should she trust it? The stories told of deadly beings who could tear through whole villages in seconds, but the way the creature stood, so unnervingly still, suggested something else. A flicker of hesitation, of restraint. A sound broke the silence, soft and barely noticeable, like a faint hum or whisper. Kayla's brow furrowed. Was the predator making that sound? She strained her ears, trying to catch the pattern. It wasn't growling, nor was it a sound of aggression. Instead, it seemed almost like a voice. Without thinking, Kayla leaned in closer, drawn to the source of the sound. To her amazement, the predator's mouth opened slightly. It wasn't roaring or screeching. It was producing a soft, deep hum that echoed in the air. The vibrations were not a threat, but something oddly soothing. Kayla's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea what the creature was doing, but she felt an inexplicable connection to the sound, to the rhythm. It was as if the hum resonated within her chest, a pulse that matched her heartbeat. She instinctively took a deeper breath, her body relaxing against its will. The predator's gaze softened. It was as though it was acknowledging her, acknowledging that she had understood something that no one else had. The predator was trying to communicate. "Can you understand me?" Kayla whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum. She wasn't sure if she was speaking to herself or to the creature, but it felt right, as if the words were the key to unlocking something far greater. For a long moment, there was no answer. The predator's eyes bore into hers, intense and calculating, but there was no aggression, only curiosity. Then, with a subtle shift of its head, the predator made a small sound. It wasn't a word. It wasn't even a growl. But it was something, a recognition. And in that moment, Kayla realized something she hadn't before. This creature wasn't just a killer. It was something far more complex, and something with its own thoughts, its own feelings. It wasn't just waiting to end her life, it was searching for something. Perhaps it was searching for her. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't filled with tension. It was a shared understanding, as if two beings from different worlds had just found the first thread of connection. The apex predator, once a symbol of death and fear, now felt like something more. A guardian, a companion. Kayla wasn't sure. But one thing was clear. This encounter would change everything. And perhaps, just perhaps, Kayla wasn't as alone as she thought. The truth revealed. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale silver glow over the desert as Kayla and the apex predator stood facing each other, the air thick with questions neither had voiced. The bond between them, fragile yet undeniable, hummed in the silence like an unspoken promise. The predator, though still massive and intimidating, no longer felt like an enemy to Kayla. It felt different. But how could that be? Why hadn't it killed her? And why was she no longer afraid? The creature's presence was still overwhelming, but now there was something else, an unfamiliar sense of calm, as if the storm that had raged inside her since it first arrived had finally settled. Kayla swallowed hard, her mind racing. She had no idea what was going on, but she couldn't ignore the pull inside her. She had to understand. Taking a slow step forward, she broke the silence. "Why are you here?" she asked softly, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. "What do you want with me?" The predator's eyes flickered, its head tilting slightly. It had heard her. She could see it in the way it observed her. But it didn't answer. For a moment, Kayla thought maybe she had spoken too soon, but then, unexpectedly, the creature took a step forward as well. Its massive form loomed closer, but this time it wasn't to strike. It wasn't to pounce. It was curious. The predator lowered its head slightly, as if considering her question. Then, in a voice that was deeper than she could have imagined, it spoke. Its words were garbled, distorted, but the meaning behind them was clear enough. "You are not what they told me." Kayla's heart skipped a beat. "They? Who was this predator talking about? What do you mean?" Kyla asked, taking another step closer, her voice a whisper as though afraid the words would disappear if spoken too loudly. The creature's eyes narrowed. The deep red glow that had once been filled with fury now seemed thoughtful. "The ones who sent me. They told me you were a threat to the balance of this world, that you would destroy everything." Kayla blinked, her mind spinning. I don't understand. I'm just..." She stopped herself. Just what? A woman in hiding? A survivor of a broken world? Could she really be seen as a threat? She had no power, no army, just herself. The predator's voice rumbled again, though this time it was softer, almost gentle. But they were wrong. Kayla stared at the creature, her mind racing to process this information. The predator had been sent to kill her, but it wasn't because she was weak. It wasn't because she was powerless. She was dangerous, not because of what she had done, but because of what she could do. "Why would they lie?" Kayla asked. her voice barely above a whisper. Who are they? And why would they want me dead? The predator paused, looking over, its shoulder toward the distant horizon as if weighing whether or not it should share this secret with her. The silence stretched, broken only by the desert wind that whispered across the barren landscape. Because you were never meant to live, it finally said. You are the last of your kind, Kayla. The last of the ones who created us, the ones who built the power that still runs through this planet. Your survival is an anomaly. Kayla's breath caught in her throat. Her survival? She was the last. Of her kind? The last of the ones who had created them? The ones who built the very power that shaped the world? But there was more. She could sense it, the weight of something huge looming over her understanding. What does that mean for me? She asked, her voice quivering with a mix of fear and curiosity. The predator's eyes softened ever so slightly. It means that the power inside you could change everything. If they find you, if they use you, they will reshape the world. But if you are allowed to live, if you choose to embrace it, you could bring about a new age. The words hung heavy in the air, settling over Kayla like a cloak she wasn't sure she was ready to wear. The weight of her own destiny crashed down upon her, but beneath the fear, she felt something else, something powerful. It wasn't just fear. It was purpose. For the first time, Kayla realized that her life, her survival, was not by accident. She had been chosen. Whether she was ready or not, the world was waiting for her. The predator's eyes softened further, its voice almost a whisper. I was sent to kill you, but now I will protect you. Kayla took a deep breath. The pieces were falling into place. The predator wasn't her enemy anymore. It was her guardian. But the path ahead was uncertain, and the dangers were far from over. One thing was clear. Kayla's world was about to change, and she had no choice but to face it. The enemy awaits. The desert night was quieter now, but the calm felt false, like the pause before a storm. Kayla stood at the edge of her village, the towering figure of the apex predator beside her, both of them facing the horizon. The creature's presence was more comforting than it had been when it first arrived, but that didn't erase the danger. Something still lingered in the air, something Kayla couldn't quite place. She could feel it in the way the winds had shifted, in the way the earth seemed to tremble beneath her feet. The world was no longer just a place of survival. It had become a battleground, and she, unwillingly, was at the center of it all. They are coming, the predator's voice rumbled, breaking the silence. Its tone was calm, almost too calm, but Kayla could hear the weight of its words. It knew something she didn't. Who? Kayla asked, her voice strained, unsure if she was ready to hear the answer. She had learned a lot over the past few days, but the truth of her destiny had only made everything more uncertain. The ones who sent me, the predator answered, its gaze unwavering. They will not let you live. You are too dangerous. Kayla's chest tightened. The revelation had settled in her mind. The ones who sent the predator weren't just enemies. They were powerful, far-reaching, and they had their sights set on her. They would stop at nothing to make sure she didn't survive. And now, with the predator standing beside her, the stakes were higher than ever. Kayla had thought that understanding the truth would bring her peace, but it only brought more questions. Why was she a threat to these powerful beings? What was it about her that made her so dangerous? And more importantly, how could she fight against something that she barely understood? The enemy is not just one force, the predator continued, its gaze now focused on the distant horizon, as if sensing something beyond the darkness. They are many, and they will come in different forms, wearing different faces. But they all want the same thing. Kayla felt the weight of its words settle on her shoulders. She was no longer just a survivor. She was the key to something much larger than herself. The predator, once an enemy, now stood as her ally. But the world was closing in around her, and soon, the battle wouldn't just be for her life. It would be for the future of everything she had ever known. We need to prepare, Kayla said, her voice steady despite the rising panic inside her. She was afraid, But she couldn't let it show. Not now. The predator turned its gaze toward her, a deep rumbling sound vibrating through the air. It was a sound of agreement. "You are not alone," the predator said, its voice firm. "I will not let them take you. I will fight with you." Kayla nodded, feeling the weight of the predator's promise. It was a strange feeling, having something so powerful on her side. But it wasn't enough. She needed to understand her own strength, her own power. She needed to prepare herself for what was coming. Far in the distance, she could feel it, the stirrings of the enemy. The world was about to change, and the battle was just beginning. Kayla wasn't ready, but she had no choice. It was time to face the truth, to face the enemy that awaited. And this time, she wouldn't be running. She would fight. The battle for survival. The sky, once a deep blue, now burned with the fire of dawn as the first light of day cracked through the horizon. The desert stretched out, endless and unforgiving, but today it felt more like a stage set for a final showdown. Kayla stood tall, her heart pounding in her chest, as the apex predator moved silently beside her. Their bond, forged in the moments of quiet understanding and shared danger, had transformed them into an unlikely pair, one human, one beast. Together they would face the storm that was now rapidly approaching. "They're close," the predator said, its voice low and steady, a stark contrast to the raw tension hanging in the air. It had been scanning the landscape for hours, its heightened senses picking up every shift in the wind, every tremor in the earth. Kayla could feel the weight of its words, the certainty that their enemies were not far off. Kayla gripped the hilt of a weapon she had fashioned herself, a crude but deadly sword, her knuckles white with the pressure. She had never imagined herself in a battle like this, never thought she would stand at the crossroads of something this monumental. But the reality was undeniable. The enemy was coming, and with them came the promise of destruction. "They won't stop," Kayla said, her voice tight, though she spoke with the resolve of someone who had no choice but to keep going. "Will we be enough to stop them?" The predator glanced down at her, its eyes glowing with a strange light. "We are not just fighting for survival, Kayla. We are fighting for something far greater. They want to erase everything you are, but that will not happen. Not while I stand beside you." The words rang in Kayla's ears, but the fear was still there, gnawing at her. The predator's promise gave her strength, but it didn't erase the uncertainty that gripped her heart. They were outnumbered, unprepared for the full scale of what was coming. And yet, there was no turning back now. The sound of approaching footsteps, slow, methodical, broke the silence. Kayla's grip tightened on her weapon. The predator's eyes flicked toward the distance, its body tensing in readiness. Then a shape appeared on the horizon, followed by another, and then more. They were here. The enemy was as Kayla had feared, beings, cloaked in shadows, their forms shifting and warping with each step. Their faces, obscured by dark hoods, gave them an almost spectral quality. These were the ones who had sent the predator to kill her, the ones who sought to control everything, even her destiny. But Kayla didn't flinch. She stood tall, her shoulders squared. The predator beside her was her protector, her ally. But Kayla knew this battle wasn't just about the predator's strength. It was about her own power, the power she had only begun to understand. She could feel it, stirring within her, an energy, ancient and untapped, ready to be unleashed. The first of the enemies charged, their dark figures moving with unnatural speed, but the predator was faster. With a deafening roar, it leapt into the fray, claws flashing, tearing through the enemy lines with terrifying precision. Kayla followed, her sword cutting through the air, meeting flesh, feeling the weight of every strike. The sound of combat filled the air, clashing metal, growling creatures, the hiss of energy blasting through the desert. But Kayla wasn't just fighting with her weapon. She was fighting with something deeper, something primal that surged within her. As she swung her sword, she could feel the power within her rising, responding to the chaos, to the fight. It was more than just survival. It was purpose. The ground beneath her feet trembled as more enemies poured into the desert. their numbers overwhelming. The predator was holding its own, but Kayla knew they couldn't keep this up forever. They were running out of time. With a deep breath, Kayla closed her eyes for a brief moment, focusing all her energy. She didn't understand it fully, but she knew what she had to do. The air around her crackled with a strange force, an invisible pressure building in the air. When she opened her eyes, everything had changed. The world felt sharper, more vivid, as if her senses had expanded beyond her own body. With a fierce cry, Kayla unleashed the power within her. The ground before her rippled, a wave of energy flowing outwards, knocking back the enemies closest. To her, the predator roared in surprise, stepping back as the sheer force of Kayla's power shook the earth. The enemies faltered, confusion flickering in their eyes. They had underestimated her. They thought she was just a girl, just a weak human, but they had never imagined the force that was awakening inside her. With every breath, Kayla grew stronger. She wasn't just fighting for her survival anymore. She was fighting for her future, for the world she had yet to discover and the life she had yet to fully claim. The battle had only just begun, but Kayla knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to lose. Not this time. Peaceful guardianship. The battle had raged through the night, with the desert echoing the sounds of chaos and conflict. Kayla, bloodied but resolute, stood at the heart of the battlefield, the dust settling around her like a veil, slowly revealing the aftermath of the fight. The once chaotic air now felt strangely still, the only sound being the soft rustling of the wind as it whispered through the scattered remains of the enemy forces. Kayla's sword was heavy in her hand. Its blade dulled from the fierce clashes, but the weight of it no longer felt as overwhelming. The enemy had been pushed back, defeated for now, but she knew it wasn't over. It never was. There was always another battle to fight, another enemy to face. But for a moment, she allowed herself to breathe, to savor the quiet that had fallen. She glanced around, her heart still racing. The predator stood beside her, its massive form silhouetted against the early light of dawn. Its chest rose and fell with deep, steady breaths, its glowing red eyes scanning the horizon as it stood guard. The creature, once sent to destroy her, now stood as her protector. And in this moment, Kayla realized something profound. The predator had become more than just her ally. It had become her companion. It wasn't just a weapon or a tool of destruction. It was a guardian, a being capable of loyalty, of trust. Together, they had survived this trial. Together, they had pushed back against those who sought to use her for their own ends. But there was something more that lingered between them now. Something unspoken, yet undeniably real. The predator turned toward her, its eyes softening as it regarded her with an intensity that almost felt protective. "You have changed," it said, its voice deep and full of respect. "Not just in power, but in spirit. You are no longer the girl they sent me to kill. You are something else now." Kayla nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. She had always thought of herself as a survivor, as someone who lived in the shadows of the world, unnoticed and unimportant. But now, standing here in the stillness of the battlefield, she understood. She was no longer invisible. She wasn't just a bystander in the story of her own life. She had become a force in the world, something both powerful and necessary. "You are not alone," the predator continued, its voice softer now, almost gentle. "You never were. Not truly. I was sent to destroy. But now, I will stay to protect. You are the future, Kayla, and together we will guard it." Kayla's breath caught in her throat as the weight of the predator's words settled over her. This wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about building, about protecting something that had yet to be fully realized. She wasn't just fighting for her own life. She was fighting for something far greater. And the predator, once a harbinger of death, had become her guardian in that fight. She looked at the horizon, the sun now rising higher, casting a golden glow over the desert that seemed to breathe life into everything it touched. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. There would be more enemies, more struggles, and more challenges to face. But Kayla knew, with a certainty that burned deep within her, that she wasn't alone anymore. The Predator stood by her side, not as an enemy but as a protector, as a companion in the journey ahead. And though the road was uncertain, Kayla felt a flicker of hope ignite in her chest. She could do this. Together, they could face anything. As the first rays of the sun bathed the desert in warmth, Kayla and the Predator stood side by side, watching the world awaken around them. The battle was over. The future was uncertain. But whatever came next, Kayla knew one thing for sure. They would face it together. The apex predator had come to kill her, but now it had become her protector, her ally, and in the silence of the desert dawn, they both stood guard over what was yet to come. And for the first time, Kayla felt at peace.